All right, I'd like to welcome everyone for joining us for this career panel, which I've titled Game Changer, Green Careers and the Inflation Reduction Act. My name is Scott Williams. I'm the Research and Education Coordinator at the Wisconsin Energy Institute. And my primary role is working with students on campus through certificate programs at the undergrad level in engineering for energy sustainability, as well as the graduate level in energy analysis and policy. And this career panel is taking the place of our usual bi-weekly sustainable energy seminar, which takes place at the Wisconsin Energy Institute every other Monday. So feel free to go to energy.wis.edu to look for events that are coming up in that series and other events that the Wisconsin Energy Institute puts on. But the Sustainable Energy Seminar is also a class for students in the undergraduate certificate in engineering for energy sustainability, as well as a master's degree in sustainable systems engineering. And the reason for hosting this panel is really to drive home the point that careers in clean energy and sustainability are growing, and the Inflation Reduction Act, which was just passed last year by the federal government, is really slated to accelerate that growth in many different sectors of our economy. So the folks that we have on the panel here today represent different areas that are affected by the Inflation Reduction Act, and we'll be sharing a little bit more about their background and kind of their outlook for careers in their fields. But before we get to our career panel, I wanted to give a brief overview of the Inflation Reduction Act and its provisions that deal with energy and climate, just so we have a little bit of context for the discussion. So like I said, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed last August, signed by President Biden. And although there's some other provisions related to health, like the Affordable Care Act and different ways of raising revenue, the bulk of it really deals with energy and climate issues. And there's a lot of spending, over $370 billion in tax credits and spending and other investments, which are helping to push us meet our commitments to dealing with climate change. So this graph shows kind of what the trajectory that we've been on in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions in our country. What the goal is, you can see that Paris Agreement goal, which is 50% below 2005 levels in 2030. And then in orange is really the Inflation Reduction Act, what that does additionally beyond kind of our current the policies that were taking place before then. So the few different folks that do economic modeling, policy modeling are projecting that with the Inflation Reduction Act, we'll get to about a 40% cut in greenhouse gas emissions from 2005 levels. So it's a significant push, and it's really the biggest climate-related law that's been passed by the federal government so far. But it doesn't necessarily get us to the goals that we've set overall. So there may be additional regulations and legislation that'll help push us to that goal. And so what's in the Inflation Reduction Act as it pertains to energy and climate? There's a lot of tax credits for clean electricity. That's existing ones like wind and solar, but then also provisions for nuclear power, for carbon capture and storage, for hydrogen, geothermal, any number of kind of non-carbon emitting electricity sources. There's other incentives for reducing air pollution and other hazardous materials. There are also individual clean energy incentives. So these are often rebates or tax credits for homeowners or renters to upgrade their homes with energy efficient equipment or insulation, or switching to electric heat pumps rather than using natural gas or oil for heat. There's also tax credits for clean fuel, like sustainable aviation fuel, as well as tax credits for electric vehicles if they meet certain provisions. There's also money to help more on the kind of climate adaptation side with regards to conservation, rural development, forestry, and a number of other grants to incentivize businesses, industrial facilities to either switch to electricity for their heat and processing, or being more efficient in kind of driving a huge change in our energy mix. There's also tax credits for manufacturing to incentivize companies to have manufacturing over here so that we can improve the resiliency of our supply chain for clean energy electricity and vehicles and other sources of energy. So that's a lot. It's over 370 billion, and that's just sort of the baseline kind of estimates. Some of these tax credits could be utilized even more so, and so that number, that kind of 370 billion number, could increase even further depending on how many people and companies take advantage of those tax credits. And this graphic just kind of shows what I was going through earlier, the different sectors of the economy that are affected. On the left-hand side, you can see those that are affected by the IRA. And then on the right-hand side, there's some complementary sectors that received some funding through the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was passed in November in 2021. So there's a lot of complementary investments in both of these laws that help us to switch to electric vehicles, to switch to cleaner sources of electricity, to incentivize industrial facilities to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and also improve agriculture and be more efficient and electrify our homes and businesses. And already, just the projections of what that investment will do. This comes from the Solar Energy Industries Association as just one example of kind of their projected growth before the IRA and with the IRA. You can see just in the next few years how much that will grow. And with that comes even more jobs as these companies are growing and investing in the United States. So this came from a group, RMI, which projected in every state anywhere between 2,000 to 140,000 new jobs are going to be induced by this act. And so it's really an opportunity for folks who are more in the kind of the technicians and installation and manufacturing. But as these companies are growing in the US, they're going to be hiring for all positions. So it's a really great opportunity for, if you're looking to work in this field, there's going to be opportunities all around. So with that, I'll introduce our panel and give you a flavor of different career opportunities in this area. So I'll just say, give a very brief introduction of our panelists and just kind of go in alphabetical order here, and then let them introduce themselves a little bit more before having some follow-up questions with them. So our first panelist is David Abel. He's the manager in energy management and strategy and policy at NextEra Analytics. David is a multiple badger, so got a BS in mechanical engineering and environmental studies, MS in mechanical engineering and environment and resources, and a PhD in environment and resources, and also did the certificate in energy analysis and policy and engineering for energy sustainability. So David, if you could just tell a little bit more about what you do currently and your career pathway to get there.
Yeah, so after I finished my PhD, I went over to NextEra Energy, which, if you haven't heard of it, it's not uncommon. They tend to pride themselves. We tend to pride ourselves on being a little under the radar for being the largest utility in the world. But yeah, largest producer of solar and wind in the world. And I started there as a research scientist, did that for about 2.5 years, built a bunch of software tools for how we decide where and what to build, lay out solar and wind projects, and even how we dispatch batteries. Then I actually helped go to market with some of those tools. We wrapped them into a suite called NextEra 360 to actually sell energy management services broadly to commercial industrial customers, to utilities, et cetera, et cetera. And now I run a small team focused on specifically how do we operate those energy management projects. So for example, we built the world's biggest battery in Florida. How do we actually operate that from a day-to-day perspective to maximize the benefit? And then there's lots of projects that we have that are in deregulated markets. So California, for example, when do you charge and discharge a battery to make the most money is essentially what that strategy entails.
Great. Thanks for sharing a little bit more about yourself. We'll follow up with some more questions in a bit. Next, I'll introduce Kathy Kuntz, who is the director of the Dane County Office of Energy and Climate Change here in Dane County, here in Wisconsin. And Kathy, Badger Connection is a master's in history from UW-Madison.
That's right. I'm your outlier, your non-technical person. So it's great to be here. Hey, everybody. So I've been involved in the energy efficiency and climate action world for probably a little over, man, it must be over 25 years now. And, I started out doing anti-poverty work and really was drawn to energy efficiency because I realized now there was the ability to see incremental progress in a way that I didn't see in some of my earlier work. So while I was still finishing my master's here at Madison, I took a job in an energy efficiency nonprofit and kind of never looked back. I mean, I spent a lot of years, 15 years in traditional energy efficiency, including helping to build the statewide Focus on Energy program. So figuring out how all of that made sense and leading that for a time. And then I spent about a decade really focused on human behavior in this space. How do we get people to do what we want them to do? And on sort of broader climate, so not just energy efficiency, also transportation and water and everything else. And then I've been with Dane County for about 3 years now. And at Dane County, I'm leading our efforts to implement our climate action plan, which, our goal is to cut emissions countywide in half by 2030. And an important piece of that to understand is that as a county government, we have almost no authority to make that happen. All we have is the power of persuasion. So it's a lot of partnership building and figuring out who to hook who up to so that we can make this easier for everyone to do and make folks feel good about what they're doing. Yeah, so that's sort of where I'm at now.
Great, thanks, Kathy. Next, I'll introduce Louis Liu, who's a sustainability project engineer at Kohler Company. Louis got a bachelor's in mechanical engineering here at UW-Madison.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott, and thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to share a little bit of my experience. So my name is Louis Liu. I'm a sustainability project engineer with the Kohler Power System, which is the engine, the generator business for the Kohler company. So many of you are probably familiar with the kitchen and bath product, but Kohler company also produce a tons of industrial application as well as residential generators and engines as well. So my role with Kohler Power System is leading a lot of design for environment workshop for all the new product development. Essentially, I bring together a cross-functional team at early stage of the product design to look at the life cycle of the product and see what we can do to improve the environmental, reducing some of the environmental impact at the early stage of the design. And in addition to that, I also lead some of the scope 3 indirect greenhouse gas analysis, as well as some of the strategy, implementation, benchmarking, and supporting some of the reporting effort internally and externally for ESG reporting purposes. So a lot of communication within our team, and also lead a sustainability committee within our business. So bring together people from all different part of the department to share about best practices, to share about way that we can engage as an individual as well as a business. A little bit of the background where I came from. So I was actually born and raised in China. So I came to UW to study mechanical engineering, always passionate about sustainability. And when I was doing my undergrad, I participated with Wisquin, the team, and doing my senior design project. And also since graduation, joined a different industry, pivoted a little bit. So I joined a construction management company called C.G. Schmidt for a few years, doing some of the mechanical, electrical, plumbing system estimating at a pre-construction stage, but wanted to focus more on what I'm passionate about, sustainability, And this is actually a fine opportunity to discuss because the position that I got in with Kohler was a brand new position they created. It's a good sign that the industry is adapting to the trend and demand for not only understanding what are the sustainability impact they are making, but also how can they make improvements to the product. So I have dabbled in the area in both the building construction sector as well as the manufacturing space. So yeah, it's a great journey so far. I've been with the business for about 10 months. A lot to learn, and it's really an exciting time to be in the sustainability field, not only with the Inflation Reduction Act and all the investment going into the area, but also, like Scott mentioned, all the other jobs that were created adjacent to it with all the trend and demand for sustainability. So really happy to be here.
Thanks, Louis. And finally, we have Jane McCurry, who is the Executive Director at Clean Fuels Michigan. And Jane's Badger connections, she has a bachelor's in operations and technical management, technology management, as well as environmental studies here from UW-Madison.
Thanks, Scott. I'm super excited to be here talking to fellow Badgers. I graduated 5 years ago, which feels a little wild to me, but I've been in this electric vehicle, clean energy, clean transportation advocacy space ever since. So really excited to share a little bit more about my background and how I kind of fell into this work. Right out of college, I was the electric vehicles program manager for Renew Wisconsin, which is a nonprofit organization in Madison that focuses on advancing renewable energy. I was hired to start their electric vehicle programs, which was really exciting. Got to do kind of a gap analysis of all the work that was happening in Michigan, and ended up working very closely with Kathy Kuntz in that role, talking about how do we increase electric vehicle adoption. And as we're doing that, how do we make sure that those vehicles are being powered with as much renewable energy as possible? I did that work for about 2 years. When this role at Clean Fuels Michigan opened up. I actually grew up in the Metro Detroit area, have very strong familial ties to the auto industry. So it was a great opportunity to bring that knowledge that I gained in Wisconsin back home to Michigan to continue working on state level policy in the clean transportation space. So at Clean Fuels Michigan, we are a trade association. So I work with industry participants to advance the industry. So my job is really making sure that Michigan has the policy environment for clean transportation industries to continue to grow and to sell more of their technology in Michigan. A lot of times that looks like proactively running bills. It can look like interpreting policy language so that the industry knows how they can and should react to that in Michigan, and also providing a united front for the industry as much as possible. You'll notice Clean Fuels has a plural in the title. So I do a lot of work on electric vehicle advocacy, but I also have some members that support biofuels or renewable natural gas or clean hydrogen. And so as much as possible, trying to foster a supportive big tent environment for the clean mobility industries in Michigan.
Scott, you're muted.
Okay, I had to click it again for some reason. Thanks, Jane. So I do have a few questions for all our panelists before we move to audience Q&A. So I'm going to stop sharing and spotlight you all. And maybe we'll go in the reverse order. So start with Jane and then go to Louis and Kathy and David. So the first question I have is really, what do you see as the major growth areas for careers in your field, and what effect on job opportunities do you foresee from the Inflation Reduction Act, both in your field and maybe the industries overall that you work with?
I think there's a ton of opportunity right now in these industries. I pulled some statistics. There's a really great report from the Environmental Defense Fund that came out recently that highlights that in the last 8 years, there's been $120 billion of investments, that's public and private money, invested in electric vehicle manufacturing nationwide. And that 42% of that amount has been in the last 6 months. So 42% of all the investments over the past 8 years have been in the last 6 months, which I think showcases the impact of federal policy, the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the CHIPS and Science Act, that are all putting billions of dollars in this electric vehicle, clean mobility, semiconductor chip space, but also how far the industry has come over the past few years. So that number, it's just going to continue to accelerate, and there's going to be tons of great jobs in both the very technical knowledge side of the industry. So we're going to need tons of software engineers, electrical engineers, battery research and development engineers to be doing all of that research development work. The manufacturing lines are going to look different too. Manufacturing an electric vehicle battery is very different than assembling a transmission. And so the knowledge level required for even those jobs working on the floor and facilities is going to be very different. And then I also mention that there is so much opportunity for folks who want to be an electrician. Not only, all of the electrification of everything that's happening in this space right now, but I was in Atlanta a few weeks ago with this company called Charger Help, and they're a startup. And what they do is they maintain charging stations. So they are, their clients are people who own and operate charging stations, and they have field technicians all across the country whose job is to go out to an electric vehicle charging station, troubleshoot, fix it so that it's up and running when people need it. They're part electrician, part construction, part tinkerer, right? There's all of these kind of cross-functional jobs that are coming out in these new industries as they continue to develop. But I think a focus on that kind of engineering, high-skilled, mixed with electrician space is going to just continue to blow up.
Louis?
Yeah, just to following up on Jane's mention, from the manufacturing, from the tech perspective, what we are seeing, even just within our own business, Kohler Power System, our business looking into what are some hydrogen related technology that we can develop, right? In addition to some of the traditional product that we provide. But what we are seeing even more, a bigger picture is the scope 3 emission is something that is going to trickle down to every level of the manufacturing supply chains. So for those of you who are not familiar with scope 1, 2, and 3, essentially is a designation created by Greenhouse Gas Protocol to help business to differentiate the emission associated with their direct emission, which is scope 1, considering everything falling within 4 walls of your facility, right? All the emissions associated with those are direct emission, and scope 2 are purchased utilities, right? They purchase electricity, steam, and heating and cooling. Those are considered scope 2 emission. Everything out of scope 1 and 2, from the upstream of the value chain to the downstream of the value chain, are all considered scope 3 emission, which is commonly the biggest chunk, 80 to 90% of your total greenhouse gas emission. And what can we do as business to reduce that? It's going to be challenging because sometimes it's not directly under control. But recently, there have been a lot of regulations coming out from European Union, from SEC, trying to increase accountability for private business owner to release information about their product, the environmental impact of that, and that's going to trickle down to all the business in the supply chain. So if you think about a generator, we have more than 1,000 different components in the generator to make up the product. And if we are required by our client to provide information on the environmental impact of our product, then we will have to reach out to every one of our suppliers to give us that information to declare their environmental impact. So that is going to further trickle down to the raw material and all the individual components that go forward. So I think there's a lot of demand in terms of helping every business to understand measuring, benchmarking their environmental impact from the manufacturing perspective, as well as developing energy solution that can adapt to the environmental demand, as well as coming out from the Inflation Reduction Act, investing in clean energy solution. So another example that we are heavily invest into is looking into alternative fuel solution. So there's a type of fuel that we created an entire campaign to help educate the clients about is hydrotreated vegetable oils. So it's an alternative type of biodiesel that is can reduce up to 90% of CO2 emissions throughout the life cycle of the product, and trying to understand where do we play in this space, not only in the wind, solar, and the cutting edge renewable energy, but the adjacent space to it. Right? How do we transform the current industry and create solution to bridge them into those with a lot of the traditional, for example, combustion engine related vehicle or generator type of product as well. So there are a lot of demand will be needed in helping the business to lead those discussions. For example, some of the work that I'm doing is bridging the technical know-how, the engineering know-how with a more collaborating, bringing team together to understand the environmental impact as well. So a lot of opportunity that will go hands in hand with the investment come with an Inflation Reduction Act.
Kathy?
Yeah, so Jane and Lewis covered a ton of ground. Maybe I'll just add a couple of things. One is the sort of whole construction building trade space, which is increasingly more and more technical and nuanced there. But we're talking about more net zero energy buildings and all kinds of things there. Here in Dane County the other day, an industry person told me that we're short 10 to 15,000 people in the construction trade. So there's like a ton of opportunities, and those are from certainly jobs that are maybe very physically intense to also project management kinds of jobs in there. There's just a lot of opportunity in that space. A lot of what Lewis was talking about, ultimately behind the scenes, we need people who understand emissions and can manage huge sets of data and then communicate that to regular folks in a way that is actionable. That's the marketing and communications piece of this is something we don't talk very much about, but people don't automatically buy a new mousetrap just because it works better. They need to be persuaded that that's a thing they need. And so as we see this growth, we're going to see a ton of opportunities in that communications space too, that we haven't talked about. And I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Kathy. David?
Yeah, 100% everything, right? I think you write something on a board that's environmentally or energy related and throw a dart at it, and it's getting more jobs these days, right? Especially energy. I started with NextEra about 4.5 years ago, and specifically in the combination of these data skills plus the engineering and communications and people skills that Kathy is talking about. My part of the company is solely focused on software, and so that combination is vital. And we've gone from about 100 people to about 400 people in the last 4 years. I think I encourage everybody to go check this out. I'm pretty sure NextEra Energy right now, 16,000 people about, has 2,000 jobs posted across the US. There's an electric vehicle team, there's a hydrogen team, there's a data center team, there's residential, there's a commercial industrial focused group. There's all of the solar and wind development. That's the classic form of what's gone on for the last 10 years, and it's all accelerating. I feel like everyone's already covered most of this, but combining some unique talent or skill in the data science, in the communications, in the engineering, whatever you really enjoy and are good at, you can find a way to link it to a job that fits these environmental and energy values at this point, whether that's in the supply chain of your company that's building things like Lewis, or whether that's at a NextEra where what you're working on is building wind and solar, or whether that's advocacy and everything in between.
Great. Thanks, David. That actually is a good segue sort of into my next question that I had was, any other advice that you would give to students who want to get into careers in this area, in any of these areas that we've been talking about, or both from a standpoint of exploring careers and options and opportunities, as well as ways to prepare themselves to make themselves more marketable for internship or entry-level positions. Maybe I'll start with David and go down the line.
Yeah, should we snake again? I'd lean towards saying what you're going to want to still focus on is what do you actually want to do from a day-to-day standpoint? So is that being a data scientist that works for an energy company, or is that being, a customer success leader or a salesperson or engineer, any of these topics, find what you like to do from a day-to-day business standpoint or some day-to-day standpoint, and then find the business that fits that. Or maybe it's not a business, maybe it's something in government or in the public sector or the nonprofit sector. But linking your skills and interests with a job and then experimenting and being willing to try something and learn from that is my best advice. I mean, I tried a few different positions at a couple different places before I landed where I am. My first job was as a hydraulics engineer at a company out in Columbus, Wisconsin, about 50 minutes north of Madison. And, I found out that building industrial cylinders that lift really heavy things is just not that exciting to me. And so I moved on and did more school and found out the things that I did and how they relate to what I would like to do. And it's been a long journey from, doing air quality research in grad school related to energy, and now writing optimization algorithms for bidding different types of energy storage into electricity markets. But connecting those dots is what created that pathway for me.
Yeah, just to build on that, because David gave a really good example. The How to Save a Planet folks talk about finding this intersection of where your skills and things that make you happy coincide with things that are good for the planet, kind of thing. And I do think that we have like this mythology that one day when you're, 19 or 20, you just wake up and you know what that is. And we all know like one person who that's true about. My college roommate did that. But for me, it was very much more, no, I tried things. And as David said, sometimes when you try things, you go, this is definitely not what gives me bliss. And that's a good thing, because you have to shut some doors to open other doors. I mean, it's okay to shut some doors and go. My first job out of college was as an actuary. Okay, it took me about 3 months to go, I am not well suited to be an actuary. Like, crossed a bunch of things off my list, and then I could move on to other things that were a better fit. So I think it's really important to try things. And as a student, that might involve like getting involved in student groups or local nonprofits who will let you volunteer with them. So you can see, oh, does it give me bliss to help someone write a research report, or does it give me bliss to organize an event or whatever, that you start to get that sense of which pieces of this really make me excited at the end of the day to do more of it tomorrow.
Thanks, Kathy. And I put in the chat a link to that Venn diagram, which I think you're referring to, what brings you joy, what you're good at, and what work needs done.
Thank you for being so tech savvy.
It's like I run these for a living. Louis, you want to share some advice as well?
Yeah, I will build on what Kathy said. One important things that I found personally very helpful is the skill of networking, the skill of connecting with people, connecting with passionate organizations and individuals that share that interest, that help you understand what would you like to do, right? So joining student organization, joining professional organization, nonprofit is a good way to do it, not only to get a taste of what you like or not, but also building your resume, building your connection before leading up to you're entering an entry-level position of job. And in fact, my own job that I'm currently working at now was through some networking that I've done, a contact when I was volunteering with U.S. Green Building Council as an emerging professional group leader over the past year, and getting to know some other people is through the context over there. Through Kohler, I learned about the opening of my current position and apply and able to get it. And you never know who you meet or who you talk to will leading you somewhere one day. So definitely encourage people to reach out to any of the people joining the panel discussion today. If you have specific interest in things that we are doing, we'll be more than happy to help make some connection as well. In addition to it, I also want to highlight the power of asking, is to reach out to people, ask for a mentor, ask for people who can support you through your journeys. There are a lot of people that I owe credit for getting to where I am today. A lot of wonderful mentors through different stage of my college career as well as professional stage, and those conversations really help bridge those pieces, those dots together. What are your interests is, and what are some availability in your community, in your area, in the industry that you are passionate about. I found that very helpful as well. So don't be afraid to ask, don't be afraid to make mistakes, because sustainability is really, you don't need a sustainability title to do sustainability work, right? It's anybody, we need all hands on deck to be involved. And like David mentioned earlier as well, it's more about finding out what you're truly passionate about, and then find an angle to bring the sustainability piece to what you do. So that would be my advice.
Excellent. And Kathy made a point. Feel free to connect with folks on LinkedIn. I know many of the panelists are active on there, and I am as well. So feel free to connect with all of us after this event. Jane?
Yeah, I just dropped my LinkedIn in the chat. Great idea. So much good advice has already been shared. I'll add 2 quick things. Based on my experience, both as a job seeker and as a hirer, be open to new doors as they present themselves. In my first job after college, I applied for a solar program manager job. They already had someone for that job, and they said, "What do you think about doing EVs?" And I thought, I don't know anything about that, but sure, sounds good. And I'm so glad I had that opportunity, and it really forged a career in this space for me. So being open to opportunities as they present themselves. And then I think also something I look for in students as I'm hiring is a balance between breadth and depth of experience. So say, again, I'm going to use my experience here. Say electric vehicles, vehicle electrification really lights you up. Get a variety of experiences in that space using your classwork or your extracurriculars. So like if you're able to pick a research project and you want to dig into critical minerals, do that. If you have another project and you can dig into what's the overlap between transportation and equity, do that, because it shows this continued interest in the subject, as well as a variety of places that you have started your knowledge and started to dig into. So that balance between finding what lights you up, and then finding as many opportunities as you can to get different experiences in that space, I think is super helpful as a starting place to jump into the industry.
Yeah, that's maybe a good plug for the certificate programs that I coordinate. We talk about having the T-shaped individual. So the vertical part of the T is that depth in your discipline. And then those certificate programs, or like an environmental studies program, can really provide that breadth across those disciplines. And yeah, the folks that we talk to, I'll say that's really valuable to have that breadth and depth together.
By the way, you're all in this meeting and in this seminar, so you're already making the right moves.
Good point. We do have a question already from Shulam, which I'll read out, but as questions come to you, feel free to type them in the chat or in the Q&A, or if you raise your hand, I'll unmute or I'll ask you to unmute yourself. So you all kind of touched on this a little bit before, but what skills do you think would be the most in demand for increasing jobs?
I can hop in and just say some of the things that we're doing right now. It's very technical, and that's growing across all of these spheres. So data science skills, data analytics skills, ability to just speak a technical language, whether that's from an engineering or an implementation measurement side of things. Those are all skills that are very actively in demand for us. But then that also means there's project management and financial jobs and things that kind of leverage more of the commercial side of skills to make sure that that actually all happens.
And building on that, the ability to translate from kind of a highly technical place to a regular policymaker place or a general public place. I mean, it's hugely valuable to be able to understand that very complicated discussion about the electric grid, but then create an analogy that your aunt could understand about it, that makes it more actionable inside an organization.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I definitely agree with both Kathy and David. I think the intersection of whatever your the skill, technical or policy focus, but bridging it to the other audience that are important to get your message across. I think a lot of the communication at the end of the day, and as well as some of the reporting, some of the measurement and data analysis to be able to not only understand the data, but present it in a way that other people can understand it as well, and driving some of the decision making, and leverage the support to spread your words as far as possible. I think those communication soft skills are very important as well.
Other questions from the audience? I guess I have a question. I know there's been a lot of focus on sort of the social impacts of energy and environmental justice and equity. So what opportunities do you see there in terms of kind of job opportunities, but more generally kind of the work that needs to be done in those areas?
Well, I can point out one part of the IRA to start that makes its way into direct financial impact for a company like NextEra is the fact that there are incentives for building projects in lower income or disadvantaged communities. And so solar and wind projects that bring a lot of money into these communities all of a sudden are now being built in communities where they can benefit from that new tax base and job base more.
And it's a perfect example then of where you need credible and effective translators, because a lot of our environmental justice communities are skeptical about new projects coming in because they've sort of borne the brunt of dirty energy projects in the past. And so I think we're going to see a piece that we haven't talked about a lot under the Inflation Reduction Act, but we're actually going to see a whole new arena of community engagement expertise come out of this, because we've got to learn to do this more effectively in communities where communities feel like those new projects are a benefit for their whole community, not something more extractive in that moment. So there's going to be a lot of room there for folks who might be in public policy or even social work or other places to have a role in this environment.
Definitely. I'd add too that a lot of the programs in the Inflation Reduction Act and in the bipartisan infrastructure law have to comply with the Justice 40 requirement, which means that 40% of the benefits have to be in historically disadvantaged communities. And benefits there is the critical piece. So it's not just that the solar array has to be in a disadvantaged community, but that community actually has to benefit from those investments. So I think that's going to help with some of those historic and previous injustices that have happened that Kathy mentioned, where we've done a pretty poor job at putting those benefits where they're most needed in the past. I would also say, as an example, some of the ways I've heard these projects being talked about in Metro Detroit is not only how do we deploy more clean mobility, so for example, increase transit access or make electric bikes more accessible, but how do we do that in a way that connects folks to good paying jobs? So is there a way that we can think about our transportation system to spin the flywheel of economic development, not just so that there's a bus that passes through a neighborhood, but so that the bus is going to places where people can be employed at fair wages in a way that doesn't take them an hour and a half to get there?
Yeah, and I'll add to that is to bridge the connection of some of the cutting edge technology that we are investing into clean energy solution, into microgrid, into a lot of resiliency that in result of the extreme climate condition that we are seeing now, to bridge that with the community that are in demand the most of needing those programs, needing those funding, needing those support, and help them get those funding and build out those projects. I think those are important things that we need to do. And the technology is already here. It's not something that we have to wait for another 5 years, 10 years to see. We already have the resource, we have the technology, we have the people who know the ins and outs of it. We just need to connect them. And one of the very first important step, and what we are doing now here, is to interpret what does the Inflation Reduction Act actually mean to our community? What do those dollar investment actually end up going to, and how do we get those money to the community that need them the most? I think it's an important first step to be done.
So, question just coming to me is some of the questions that I get often from students, whether at the bachelor's or master's or PhD level, is kind of what is the value of getting a advanced degree, master's or PhD versus just staying with a bachelor's degree. And the folks on the panel here have different levels of degrees. So and you're all successful in where you are right now. So what do you think, from your perspective, for either a company or an organization, what would be some reasons for going for an advanced degree, or the considerations that folks should have whether or not they should pursue an advanced degree?
Maybe I'll kick it off since I went and got too many. No, I'm just kidding, just the right amount. I think that it comes down to, what do you really want to do and how do you want to spend your time? So for me, I spent 5 years in grad school, right? And the reason I did that was primarily because somebody asked me, if you spend all of this time getting this degree and then you don't use it, will you be mad that you spent the time doing that? And my honest answer was no. I was enjoying what I was doing and I wanted to spend time looking into interesting issues from an academic standpoint. Now, what that unlocked for me is being able to step into a company like NextEra Energy, a big corporate beast, in a research and development arm that is smaller, and play a big leadership role as a scientist right away and work on a lot of projects that had a lot of visibility. And then fast forward and, I'm running a new venture and then a team, a few years later. I think without the degree, I wouldn't have stepped in that type of position. And that's not to say that if I had started at NextEra 5 years earlier in more of an analyst role or in a, recent graduate from undergrad role, I couldn't have gotten to the same place in the same amount of time. But it was the path that I thought I would enjoy the most at the time, and it unlocked its own doors. And like anything else in life, continuing to put your best forward with whatever choice you make and running forward is what's going to make you, it's going to get you what you want, regardless of which choice you make. Investing in the decision is much more important than the decision itself.
I agree. I can share from the other end of the spectrum. I don't have a master's degree. I have 2 undergrad degrees that I got at the exact same time. I didn't know what I wanted to do after college, and so it didn't make sense for me to go straight into a master's program because I wasn't sure what I would need. And I am now in a career where I don't feel that I need a master's degree to be doing my job well and to be competitive on the job market. It may change, if you want to work in policy advocacy and you want to work for a big company, being a lawyer, having a master's degree in policy analysis probably would be helpful. And so I think it just depends on what you want to do. And I guess, yeah, to David's point, invest it in the decision, because I think it'll change for everyone depending on how technical and what your goals are.
Thanks. So I did get a question here in the chat. So if anyone in the panel, so the first question is, what types of graduate student experience did you find most useful for informing your current career? I guess we can expand that to anyone if you want to talk about your undergrad experiences as well. Maybe start with that question, then I'll ask the follow-up.
I'll just say in a single word, applied. Anything applied is going to give you a skill that you can demonstrate, and it's going to give you something on your resume that you can talk about.
I want to, well, I don't have a master's degree to start with, but I want to add on that anything, the experience that is either an internship that you'll be able to do during your school time, or a study abroad opportunity that can bring you to a different area and give you a new perspective, that I found that personally very, very helpful. I spent a year studying in Germany and did a research assistant program, and that's a completely different environment to look at how people live their life, and you never know how would that spark you and give you an idea and interest. What do you want to do for a professional life after school? So.
And I would maybe add to that the other experience that I think is really useful, and it might surprise all of you, is those group projects. Because working in a group is part of what you do in the real world, and some of those same annoying problems that you have as a student on a group project you have in the real world. And it's not that easy to get people like eliminated all the time, so you have to figure out how am I going to make this work and get everyone to a successful place. And the more you do those things, sort of the more you build those soft skills. Somebody talked earlier about soft skills, and when I'm hiring people, there's a lot that we can teach people if they don't know it. But if you don't have those soft skills, it's really hard to teach you that. And we probably do not have the capacity to take that on as a local unit of government. So really all the things that make you sort of a more effective team member, which, okay, group projects, but also volunteer work and work in student clubs and all of that, I think can be really valuable.
Or to take that and apply it directly to my grad school experience, present your work. Present your research as much as you possibly can, because not only is it helping you craft a message of what you've done and yourself, which is ultimately what an interview is, right? It's just a presentation of yourself, but you're also building the soft skills of how do I give a good presentation at the same time.
I also want to add to Kathy's point of volunteering and trying things. Part of doing those internship is about finding out what you like, but also finding out what you don't like. If there's certain experience you want to try out, but then realize that you completely hated it, then that's a great opportunity that you spend that 3 months and deciding that's not a path you want to follow through. Then you don't look at that or consider it as you graduate and looking for a full-time job. And finding volunteering opportunity and trying something new is a two-sided benefit. Either tell you something you like or something you don't like. So take advantage of making mistakes.
Thanks. Those are all great points. Another question. This one's directed at Kathy. It says, it sounds like much of your work depends on building relationships and focus on community engagement. What do you think county level governments can do to support clean energy transition for low income people and communities?
Oh, there's a ton we can do, and some of it we're doing. So at Dane County, we have a we help to fund new affordable housing projects, and increasingly to get our money, you have to be building more efficient buildings that have better air quality in them, so we're integrating our climate commitment into the places where we give out grants. A lot of it, though, is the relationship building we build with community-based organizations and helping them have a seat at the table, so that as we're thinking about all of this new federal funding, really thinking about how do we empower our communities to take advantage of that. So as maybe an example, a local nonprofit, Centro Hispano, has been in the process of building a new facility. And I've been sitting in on some of their building design meetings just to help them articulate what they want in a way that the building team hears that and executes the much greener building that they want for the future. So there's like all kinds of ways we can do that.
Thanks. All right, I'll put out one last call. We're coming up on the hour here. Any last questions, either in the chat or if you want to raise your hand, this is your chance to ask our panelists. Right. Well, is there anything that we didn't ask? Any sort of last pieces of advice or things that we didn't cover today that you want to share before we close up here?
So I'm just compelled to stick in the chat the link to our, we have a whole section of our website devoted to the IRA. So if any of you want to dig in further to what's available, there's a ton of stuff there. Have to plug that all the time.
Great, thanks, Kathy. Well, I appreciate all the time and advice that you have all shared today. So thank you so much for speaking with our students and our community members today. This will be recorded, so it'll be offered first for our students in our certificate program, but then we'll post it on the Wisconsin Energy Institute website as well. So thank you all for joining us, and hope to see you at future Wisconsin Energy Institute events.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
for having
Scott.
us.
Have a good day.